Hi crawlers, Stiltskin here. Let's get crawling. If you remember last time, we had to kind of, skip a few things because I lost some footage. So I want to just go ahead and give you an idea of what happened since then. We're using a flail protection. We have this ring that we can identify. Got some other things. We found a book of necromancy. We probably won't use that for a while. But let's go ahead and identify this ring first. A ring of resist corrosion. That's not bad, it's not amazing, but there are enemies that could corrode us or use acid, and that'll give us some protection from that, so not too bad. Let's go ahead and get going. And we did actually finish dungeon level 5 already, so we're just gonna head downstairs. There's another potion of mutation. Probably we're not gonna drink these, but we'll hang on to it for now. That's an altar to Zom. He's one of the more interesting gods. Not usually a very good god to worship, but a very fun god to worship. He likes to mess with you, and you have to keep him entertained. But that's not really what we're working on right now, so, maybe we'll talk about Zom more later. One thing that I tried to explain last video, but I lost the footage, might as well go ahead and do now, is guaranteed damage reduction. So I want to look at this armor again, just real quick. Something that's important to know about heavier armors is that they come with more guaranteed damage reduction. So right now this particular piece of armor is giving us 10 AC, and that's based on our skill and our strength. But another reason that it's good to wear heavier armor, if you can, is that you have more guaranteed damage reduction. And basically what that means is that it's kind of like insurance against getting a bad armor roll. The way armor works, at least my understanding, I'm pretty sure this is right, when you get hit by something, that's going to kind of roll a die. And that die is kind of just like a 1 through whatever your armor is, or could even be a 0. And that kind of just means that you have a chance of reducing that damage by anywhere between 0 and the amount that your armor class is. But what guaranteed armor reduction means is it's kind of insurance against a bad roll on that. So the heavier the armor, typically the higher GDR. So for example, super heavy armor like crystal plate, I don't remember the exact number, but it's pretty close to 50%. So that means you could not roll lower than half of your armor. We don't have 50% right now, but just for example's sake, if we did have 50% armor class, 15% guaranteed damage reduction, then our armor would be reducing every hit that we get by at least half of our AC, so about 7 or 8. So that's why even if you have a piece of armor, like say we had like leather armor or something, and it was highly enchanted, and it gave us somehow more armor class than this chainmail, it still might be a good idea to use the chainmail instead, because we're going to have that higher GDR. It's one of the reasons that melee characters tends to do better when they get hit by things than casters, even if the caster is like, say, a draconian who comes with scales and has kind of high armor. Just because that guaranteed armor reduction makes a huge difference. It protects you from rolling poorly, which, statistically is going to happen to you when you play, because you're going to get hit a lot. Even though these guys are pretty weak compared to me, I'm still being kind of careful, just because you never know what's going to come around the corner and you want to have as much health as possible. This is a shop. It's a distillery, so they're obviously selling potions. And even though we don't know what any of these potions are, because the shop knows what they are, it'll actually tell us. And one of the cool things about buying potions you haven't identified is it actually identifies it for you. So by spending just 39 gold, not only do I get a potion of curing, I actually ID all potions of curing. And sometimes you'll even see bad potions in here, and it can be a good idea to buy those because they're really cheap, and it identifies them for you. In this case, they only have good potions, and I'm not really going to complain about that. But I am going to just go ahead and buy some of the more useful ones. And now when I look in my inventory, you can see I have 2 potions of curing. So I did not know that that other potion was a curing potion, but now I do. Same thing for haste and agility. So I just identified 3 types of potions by spending a little bit of money. And I got more potions. Not bad at all. I killed the rest of this Knowles pack, so I know he's probably by himself. That's why I was okay approaching him. certain enemies tend to come in packs, and gnolls are one of those kinds of enemies. This is an electric eel. These guys can actually be pretty scary because they hit from range with electricity, and they hit pretty hard. They don't have that much health though, so we can probably kill him. The reason I backed up is because I did not want to stand in the water to fight him. When you're standing in water, you get a pretty big penalty to your attacks. It's a lot harder to hit enemies. And it's also gonna make you move more slowly. So it's a really bad idea to walk up to an electric eel unless you're just really overpoweringly strong. And we're not, so, you know. We already cleared this floor. When you're playing a melee class, like a fighter, you tend to be able to play a little more quickly, just because, you know, it's a bit more straightforward. This guy right here is a white, and so he has a draining attack. The way draining works is, if we look at our skills now, we're a little bit drained. He didn't drain us too bad, but you'll notice that all of our skills are in purple, and that's because he drained us. It just means that we have a temporary reduction to those skills, but when we get experience, we'll kind of recover from that. It doesn't permanently penalize you. A long time ago it did, and that made draining really, really scary, but now it's just sort of a temporary status effect. So you'll see that it says at the bottom left that our life force feels restored, so that means the draining's gone. Our skills are pretty much back to normal. Now you can get pretty heavily drained if you're not careful at certain enemies, and that can be really bad because it takes a while to recover from, and during that entire time that you're recovering, you're going to be way worse at everything that you're used to doing. You just got artifact plate armor, so if this turns out to be good, then that'll be really good for us. Normally, if you have an artifact, it's good to use an ID scroll on it because they can have certain unique things to artifacts that are pretty bad for you. But in this case, I think it's going to be worth the risk because plate armor is a really heavy kind of armor. We kind of want that, and it could be really good. We do have remove curse too, so we could take it off. It could have something that would like drain us when we take it off or cause us to get magical contamination. Oh, whoops. But we lucked out. That's plus 10 plate armor that gives a little bit of strength. So our armor just went from 15 to 27. That is very good. That's pretty good, definitely. We're definitely going to want to increase our armor skill now, but we're so close to getting minimum delay. We're only 0.5 maces and flails away from that. I'm just going to finish that out, and then we're going to want to invest pretty heavily in armor. That'll make this plate armor penalize us less, and it'll be even stronger. As you can see, the base armor rating for this is 10, and the encumbrance is 18. We're getting 12 AC from it base, but because it's plus 10, it's going to go ahead and just add 10 more straight up. The bonus from the magic enchantment on it, the plus 10, does not get multiplied by anything, but you know, obviously, even just a plus 10 not multiplied by anything is a huge amount of armor. And so this character so far has actually been pretty lucky. You did miss out on a fight when I lost that footage that was pretty spooky. I was fighting Duvessa and Dowin, which are two uniques that kind of come paired together. And a centaur came up and trapped me, but we did manage to get through it using our god skills. I'm hoping that something kind of dangerous comes up so that I can demonstrate for you what using those skills kind of looks like. I don't want these whites to be hitting me all at the same time, but there's also not really a good hallway immediately available. So I think I'm just gonna explore a little bit, but you wanna be really careful when you're running away from guys into new territory, because just like that, now we've identified even more guys, so we're being chased by more people. I do see that there's this hallway down here I didn't notice earlier. This looks like a good place. Because there's a spear guy there, I'm gonna back up one so that he'll come into the hallway, and then I'm gonna go forward one. This way I can just kind of prevent them from piling up and that sort of thing. So now the spear guy's killed, he can't stand in the back poking at me. Our maces and flails finally got to minimum delay, so now we're gonna invest pretty heavily in armor, and that'll make our plate armor even better for us. Let's just keep on murdering these guys. We're pretty strong now. Now that we have this armor and a flail of protection. Protection's not really the best brand, but any kind of brand early in the game is going to be quite helpful. So we're sitting pretty good right now. Don't think... Actually, we could get this Mace of Holy Wrath. It's not really a very good weapon type, so I don't think it's worth it. Maces just aren't as good as flails, straight up. Flails just hit harder. They're better. Their weapon types, you know, they kind of get stronger. So there are, you know, types that are stronger than flails also. We just haven't run across one of those yet. You'll notice as we increase our armor skill, our AC has already gone from 27 to 28. And so the heavier armor you're wearing, the better that armor is, the more advantage you're going to get from increasing your armor skill. The reason I'm backing up here is I don't want to have to close the gap on that Orc Priest and allow him to get free smites off on me. Smite is going to go right through my armor, and there's nothing you can do to resist it. That's why Orc Priests are some of the scariest enemies you can fight in the early game. By the time you're here on dungeon level 7, an Orc Priest is probably not nearly as scary, but they should still be treated with respect, because they are pretty spooky dudes. This wizard is toast. And Okawaru just gave us a gift, some Needles of Confusion. Well, that is completely useless to us because we don't have a blowgun, but you know, thanks for the thought, I guess, Okawaru. Sometimes you wonder about the gifts. The gifts are kind of leaned toward things that will be useful to you, so he's a lot more likely to give me a mace than a sword because I've been investing in maces and flails. But sometimes he still gives you stuff that you don't really want or need. But you know, it's not like it hurt anything to receive free stuff, so you can't complain too much. Just kill some more orcs. We can also talk a little bit more about sound, since that's kind of where I left off last time. Basically, the way sound works is most things that you do make sound. And if you're wearing heavy armor, even just moving around is going to make kind of a lot of sound. It depends on your stealth skill, which obviously we have at 0 right now because we're not really trying to sneak. But even if you're not a sneaking class, sound is really important to be aware of. It's one of the ways that enemies will notice you even when they can't see you. And if you're not careful about how much sound you're making, you can have a whole army of guys kind of converge on you, and things can get pretty ugly pretty quickly. So that's one of the reasons, like from last episode, I was talking about wanting to back up and let enemies come to you. That was probably not the best way to maneuver there, but it worked out. Just because when you back up and let them come to you, even if they're not a threat, well, it's a lot less likely that the sound you're making from fighting them is going to attract more enemies. So you back up into territory that you've already explored, and that way you're much more likely not to have new guys hearing you fight and then coming to investigate what's happening. Sound is also really important if you're a spellcaster, and some spells can be really loud. So like Fireball is an incredibly loud spell. And so it's really powerful, but you also want to be really careful about how you use it. We just stepped on an alarm trap, so we are marked. It's this kind of red status effect at the top right. That means that pretty much everything in this floor knows where I am and is coming to find me. So, you know, it's not awesome, but we're so strong right now that I'm not actually that worried about it. This is a centaur. So they move quickly and they can hit quite hard. Now, because we have so much armor, I'm not actually all that worried about him. Normally I would want to try to juke him to avoid getting shot, but there's really nowhere I can move right now that would help me do that, so I'm going to have to just approach him. One thing you should know about centaurs is that when you are next to them in melee range, they will actually switch to melee attacks, even though they're much weaker than their ranged attacks. So even if you're playing as a ranged class, it can actually be a good idea to get in melee range of a centaur if you're able to. Here's another unique, Erica, the Fiery Tempered. She's kind of scary. She can confuse us, and she has a pretty good shot at doing that, and she also has some pretty strong ranged nukes. She always spawns with a flaming sword, and so if you're using swords, she can be a really good person to run into because you know that you'll get a flaming sword from her. I'm still not that worried about this fight because she's almost dead. So she can hit us pretty hard, but not hard enough. We got a lot of piety from killing her because she was threatening, and we just unlocked Okawaru's second ability. It's called Finesse. And what this does is it makes you attack much faster. And so, just like the rest of Okawaru's abilities, it's really straightforward and also really, really strong. It does use a pretty good chunk of piety. You can see, actually, well, the piety cost, it says it's small. It uses a lot more piety than heroism, even though they both say small. So you can still use it if you need to. You shouldn't hold back if it's a dangerous situation. But you don't want to use it if you don't really need it, because it'll just waste some piety. But it does make you attack much faster. So you can get down to just absurdly fast minimum delay and be attacking with incredible speed. I think that we have enough armor now that I'm going to invest in shields, because that is actually slowing down our attacks and giving us some other penalties to evasion and things like that. So I want to make sure that I am getting rid of that penalty. If we look at the shields, you can see that once we get to skill level 15, it'll remove the penalty. I'm really not a big fan of this whole setup with the electric eels. I'm going to try and get it to where I can hit him in melee and not eat too many electricity bolts. So you can see they hit really, really hard. So you have to treat them with respect, even if it says they're easy because of their hit dice. There are some enemies, electric eels are among them, that hit you really hard even when you're higher level than they are. So it's important to be aware of. And you know, I'm not being as careful as I would be if I were weaker. So you want to just kind of judge the strength of your character, and the weaker you are, the more careful you want to be. Right now, I'm not really going out of my way to be all that careful. This is a good time to talk about the order of branches that you probably want to do. So right now we're at dungeon level 8. And typically you don't really want to go too much past dungeon level 10 before you do the lair. The dungeon goes all the way down to 15, but it starts to get a lot stronger at 10. And it does vary somewhat, but the lair is typically going to be a little bit easier than deeper in the dungeon. And so usually I'll get to around dungeon level 8, 9, or maybe 10, depending on where the lair spawns and all other factors. And then I'll go ahead and just do the lair, because it's going to be a lot easier than some of the other things I could do. I have 3 ID scrolls, and I want to go ahead and use one of them on this Wand of Hasting. Something that you probably want to know about wands is that if you use them without identifying them, you can do it, but it does waste some charges. And so a lot of times it's a good idea to actually ID them, and then you know exactly how many charges they have. I just kind of was curious what that staff was. But knowing how many charges they have is important, and it means you don't have to waste charges when you fire that wand. And a Wand of Hasting is incredibly good. We are being really lucky right now with the items that we have. This plate armor is just absurd that we found something that good so early. The flail protection is pretty good. And a Wand of Hasting is arguably the best wand in the game. It's good for every character. Haste basically just makes everything you do faster. You move faster, you attack faster, you cast spells faster, and being faster is pretty much always better. Being hasted does give you some magical contamination. The way magical contamination works is that certain things you do will start to add to it, and it's not really a problem at first. I only want to fight one of these. Oh, well, that didn't work out how I wanted it to. Anyway, let's go here. At least only 3 guys can attack us at once here. Not ideal, but still better than all of them. This Komodo dragon hits really hard, so I wanted to prioritize him. You can see we actually took a lot of damage. If you press Control P, you can look at what's been happening, and so we could actually look at that hit we took to see just what hit us so hard. And so kind of about in the middle here, above that yellow text for the Komodo dragon is heavily wounded, it says the Komodo dragon bites you, and there's an exclamation point. The number of exclamations is about equal to, oh, this is going worse than I thought. We're gonna heal wounds, and this is probably a good time to go ahead and use heroism. So I'm just gonna press A, and then A again, and that's gonna increase all of my combat skills by 5. So this is gonna make me a lot more effective at fighting. Porcupines have a retaliation when you hit them, and so you can actually take a lot of damage from attacking porcupines. Something good to know. Anyway, we got a little interrupted there by that little bit of a surprise. I didn't realize that we were in as much danger as we were. Anyway, contamination. So certain things like hasting yourself, going invisible, failing at casting spells, using scrolls of blinking or casting control blink, all those things will add to your magical contamination. And at first it's not that harmful and it does go down over time, but if you get too much magical contamination, then it will actually do bad things. Like it can give you negative mutations, it can explode you. It's not good to have a ton of magical contamination. And one of the ways that you get a bunch of contamination all at once is hasting yourself while you're already hasted. That will extend the duration of your haste, but it'll also add a ton of magical contamination. And you usually want to avoid being contaminated. Here's a dire flail. So this is a two-handed weapon that Okawaru gave us. Normally I would probably want to try this out, but we've already invested a decent amount in the shield skill, and I'm thinking I just want to stick with shields. So I do kind of want to see what it is. Maybe I would want to use it eventually. Dire flail protection, not really even that awesome. So we'll stick with the one-handed flail, and we'll keep using our shield. We don't really need to worry about contamination unless we're just recklessly burning haste and invisibility and a bunch of things all at once. But negative mutations can be quite bad. You can get things that make you lose your temper in combat and go angry. You can shout uncontrollably. You can be deformed, which makes you get less armor from armor that you're wearing. All kinds of bad things. You can get good things too, but when you're contaminated, they're almost always negative mutations. They're weighted toward being negative. So, not very good. And again, I'm not playing perfectly. I'm not going to try and play perfectly if I think that it's not all that scary. Also, wolves are fast, and running away from fast enemies, unless you're really close to where you want to run to, is not often a good idea. Sometimes it's more risky to run away than it is to just try and stay to fight. Even if you're actually kind of worried that you might die, running away from, say, like a ranged enemy that's right next to you is not always a great idea, because as you run away, he's just going to be piling shots on. So depending on the situation, it could be better to just power through and try to kill him as quickly as you can instead of running. Here's a cloak. We do not have a cloak yet, so we're going to get that. Another thing that you can do is Control F to find items. And I like to do this periodically just to see if there's anything I missed. So like right now we don't have gloves, so I'm just checking to see if there were gloves that I didn't notice. Same thing for boots. We still haven't actually found any boots or gloves. So it's not terrible. It does help you with a little bit of armor, but it's not the end of the world we don't have them. It is good to periodically check though. Anyway, I think this will be a good place to wrap it up. Once again, I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this, if this was helpful to you, please go ahead and like or subscribe. I don't put ads on these videos, so it doesn't really help me, but it does help, get the word out. And I guess I'll see you next time. Take care, crawlers.